Hi, my name's Nick with Machine Gun Dad. Welcome back to the channel. Today, on this episode of our field trip series, we have the Armalite AR-180B, as was mentioned in our last field trip video. I told you it was going to be the next one. Lo and behold, it is. It is roughly the same as the AR-180 with a couple oddities that we'll get into. So, let's go ahead and take it apart. First thing to note about how this is different from the original 180 is the way that you pop the recoil spring assembly off the back end of the rifle is different. On the AR-180, you had kind of a T-shaped piece of metal with a spring-loaded pin that you would push in and fit into the rear sight hood. On this one, you can just take a 223 or an empty 223 and push it into the back of this little cutout here to push it forward, relieving spring tension, getting that off, and then just kind of rotating up, keeping finger pressure on it because, once again, it does like to shoot out the back. Another thing to note, most people, when they go ahead and try and disassemble this, they will let this top receiver flop down onto the pin. You don't want to do that with these lowers. They are plastic polymer. This piece right here is the only thing holding the upper on the gun. It is relatively fragile polymer. If you let all of the weight of this upper drop down onto this piece, it will snap right off. There were people who were selling replacement parts for it. It was that common. So when you take this apart, do not just let it drop down because you might end up breaking your quite pricey lower. Another thing to note about it is this little E-clip right here. This is what they went to instead of doing the rolling ball on the AR-180, and it's a little bit of a pain. You kind of want to get your finger on one end and a little tool of some kind on the other end and try and push that forward off the pin like so. I would advise using a white table because this is a very tiny black pin piece that can go flying off if you're not careful with it. And if you lose that, good luck finding another one. Once that is off, you just go ahead and that pin comes straight out the back end, just like a normal pin. Your lower will come off like so. Setting that off to the side. Now, everything else is roughly the same as a typical AR-180. Recoil spring guide rods. You'll notice that on the original AR-180, you had two pins here. This one just has one towards the bottom. Pull your bolt to the rear when you get to this circular cutout back here, and that will just, charging head will just pop right up and out. Then your bolt will slide out the back end. On the front of the receiver, same thing. Just kind of wiggle your hand guard off the top end. And this looks identical to the AR-180. So same thing, grab the front, pull back, pull this cover off, pull your gas piston out if it wants to cam out off to the side. If that doesn't work, you can just pull the cover off the back end, giving yourself enough room for the rest of the piston to come out. And that is once again fully disassembled AR-180, this time with a B. Getting into bolt disassembly, you will notice that it is the exact same thing as the AR-180. In fact, they are interchangeable because your recoil spring and guide rods will fit into this the exact same way as it will in the AR-180. So, same rules apply. Keeping constant finger pressure on the firing pin to alleviate spring pressure, and get that pin out to remove the firing pin. This one is a bit stiffer than the AR-180, so we're just going to push down on that and use our handy dandy little punch and push that pin all the way through the side of the bolt, and your firing pin and spring will come out. Same rules apply. Make sure 110% that you have a spring on this when you put it back in, because it will not function correctly without it, and it also functions as a safety for slam fires. With that out, this little pin now comes free, with the firing pin no longer keeping it captive in the bolt, and this slides right out the front. Same as the AR-180. Go ahead and put it back together. Putting the bolt back together, there is something to note. When you do reassemble it, make sure that your extractor is facing to the right and your ejector is facing to the left. This gun does eject to the right, so you kind of want to have it ejecting to the right. Go slide it all the way down, and you'll see that that hole lines up on the side there. Take your pin, where your firing pin locks in to help hold everything together. Slide that through, making sure that these cuts are once again parallel with the rest of the bolt, or else your firing pin will not slide in and lock everything together. It's kind of a necessary part. Take your firing pin, push that in all the way through. You will know if you have it lined up correctly when you are able to push the firing pin into the bolt and not have anything being forced out due to your pin being rolled over incorrectly. Then you're going to take your set pin, push the firing pin in, push that through. Now your bolt is fully assembled. Let's go ahead and slot it back into the upper. Before we can go ahead and put the bolt back in, we need to reassemble the gas system. It's a little bit different on this one than the AR-180. We are going to go ahead and reinstall the piston itself and then the cups on the end, just to clear as much space as possible, because it is a little stiff. Push that all the way in, slot that back over, take your other cup, slot that over the second piece, and your piston will go forward, and it looks like one big continuous part. You can notice the taper that runs down, just to know that you've put it together correctly. Now that our gas system is reinstalled, we can go ahead and take our bolt, once again, making sure that the recoil spring guide holes are facing towards the top end of the receiver. The bolt is all the way forward, is cammed all the way forward. We're going to take the back end of the receiver, sliding the bolt in until this cutout lines up with the hole on the bolt, taking our charging handle, slotting that in, riding it forward until it locks into the breech face. Then we can take our handguard. As you can see, there is the two holes like the AR-180 where your recoil spring and guide rods go into. So you want to install this before you put the recoil spring assembly back in, or else you're not holding the handguard on the firearm. Making sure to hold that down, because these guides do lock in. Run this in, line it up with the holes on the back end of the bolt. Everything functions. That's good. Now, we're going to go ahead and make an upgrade. We're going to throw the Nodex spud lower on this instead of the original AR-180B on this. The same thing would apply backwards as to what we did in the beginning. You have to put your pin in and then slide that E-clip onto it. It's a little aggravating, but it's better to put that on than take it off, because you don't end up losing the darn thing. On the Nodex spud lower, it has a captive pin, so you don't have to worry about losing anything. Line that up with the hole on the bottom end of the top receiver, sliding that all the way through. Now it is locked in. Same rules apply as taking it off. You are going to take your finger and push your recoil spring. If you hold the handguard down, push your recoil spring as far back as you can, rock it down. Now that it is cleared the back end of the lower, it locks down in. There you go. As I mentioned, when assembling with the Nodex bud lower, you are going to want to keep an eye on your pin and E-clip. And just to show you just how much of a pain this is to put back together and why the Nodex bud is such a superior lower compared to the 180B's original lower, you have to make sure you keep your pin all the way up through the receiver, or the lower. Push that as far as you can in, and then just try and force that little E-clip to get itself back around the pin. As you can see, it does not like to do that. It will fight you a lot, and sometimes it will, as you go to push it in, it'll just pop out. And since this thing is tiny and a dark color, if you're working on anything that's easy to lose small bits on, this thing can just fly off and disappear, and it's a pain to try and get this thing back on. It helps a lot to use a tool to slot that back in, but this thing is janky, finicky, and very easy to lose bits. The Nodex bud is a superior lower on that basis alone, not to mention all of its other benefits. Normally, when we go ahead and do these videos, we just show you a field strip. However, this time, we decided to give you a fancy-nancy little upgrade. Throw the Nodex bud lower on this amazing AR-180B. This thing was fun to take apart, fun to learn how it works, and with the AR-180 and the AR-180B, go ahead and learn and see where iterative development came into play with the original, the B, and the Nodex bud upgrade that came around later. So, I want to thank you for coming to the channel, for watching this episode of our Field Strip series. Like, comment, and subscribe. Check out our channel on Rumble. We do have a lot of really cool things on there that we can't post here because we will immediately lose any revenue on this place. So, thanks again.